Good afternoon, everyone. I have a special guest today. I have my publicist, who I'm going to introduce you all to, who's incredibly deep into remote viewing. And we haven't touched on that here. I mean, I've basically spoken about it maybe a couple of times, didn't really go into it deep, but she's deep into it. She goes to conferences. We're going to learn all about it today. So let me bring her on with no further ado. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Micah. Day. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited because anytime I
I'm
can talk about remote viewing, it's a good day.
Yes,
So,
I hear you. So I was very shocked a while back when you first mentioned to me that you were going to a remote viewing conference. That
yeah.
was so exciting to me. So, for people who don't understand what remote viewing is, could you give us an overview of what it is?
Okay. So, first of all, I want to say that there's another conference coming up August 8th that I'm going to in Virginia, and it's called IRVA, so International Remote Viewing Association, and they're teaming up with Monroe Institute. They're the ones with like HemiSync and the binaural beats that you listen to. So we're going
Yes.
to be in Virginia. So it's really cool. So it's irva.org if anybody wants to go. And they
So,
also
guys,
have an online.
binaural
What?
beats are basically. I'm just letting everyone know. Binaural beats. I've talked about this basically recently, but what it is when you have earphones in. You can't really do it without earphones because it has to do a specific thing. One plays a certain frequency, the other plays a slightly different frequency. And then what happens is your brain interprets a third frequency, and it does things like lowers your blood pressure, brings out theta waves in your brain, all sorts of good things. It relaxes. It's like deep state hypnosis in a way. That's what theta beats are. Now, if you have any hearing loss, or if you were to just type in binaural beats on like your cell phone, right, and then play it, it wouldn't work because it doesn't. You need the separate sounds in both ears to work. So, just wanted to throw that out. But anyway, go on. So you're going in Virginia.
Yeah. So, and there's an online version of the conference too. So if you can't get out there, you can at least do it online. So I just wanted to say that. But so yeah, so remote viewing is a little confusing to some people because you can get people that are psychic that tune in to a location of some sort and then they can describe it. The difference is what I'm talking about when I say remote viewing or controlled remote viewing. This is really the origin of what I'm doing is from the military
Mm-hmm.
that started in the 70s. And so, and it was called Project Stargate.
Mm-hmm.
And they were using it for like, psychic spies. So they
Mm-hmm.
were gathering intel about locations of POWs, classified information from different countries like Russia and all that stuff. And you can look it up on Wikipedia to find out all the in, amazing, interesting stuff that
Right.
they've done and projects that they worked on. And so I'm working with a variant of the controlled remote viewing called transdimensional systems, which was created when it was declassified. And it's more of a civilian type. And I'm working on moving this into the future. So, based on the research that we've done, plus I've done some experiments with it too, which is published. We're working on what we've learned and applying it and kind of updating it. And it includes mind and body.
Mm.
So back in the military, they would like sit or be laying down and they would be stuck at a desk. And what it looks like is you have pen and paper and you're writing down what you perceive or sketching out things,
Right.
and what I'm doing is kind of the same thing, but I want to engage your body. So you're actually standing up, you're walking, you're uh, tapping into all your senses and figuring out what is at the location.
Now, do
And
you have to put yourself in a certain mindset to be able to do this? Is that why you guys teamed up with binaural beats because it gets you in the right frequency?
So in the beginning of it, we'd start with a cool down. And really the goal of a cool down, well, that's kind of a military term. It's like a meditation or whatever, but it's a cool down. And really what you want to do is just get rid of everything you know. Because when we're tapping into the subconscious, what the challenge is that relationship between our left brain and our right brain. And so we have to figure out how to make that work together because the left brain is your conscious, and that's the part that analyzes everything. And there's no business for that in remote viewing. We can't, when we're doing a session, we cannot analyze, we cannot draw conclusions, nothing, because nothing is what it seems, as you know. Like everything has a different perception. So we have to set aside any preconceived notion of anything
Mm-hmm.
and open up the right brain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the part that really, it doesn't know words or anything. It's just really engage with your senses. And so that's the part we want to work on.
Now, when you see this on TV, for example, they did a remote viewing in my
Japan.
Dan Brown's
Oh, Dan Brown. Yeah.
in Dan Brown's. I always forget the name of this. The Lost Symbol. That was it. They had a remote viewer, and they show him with a pen and a piece of paper, and he's drawing things. But sometimes it's only like a teddy bear or a little thing here or there. It's not like you're drawing out a map of where the location is. And if you could too, could you please differentiate for us the difference between astral projection and remote viewing?
Right. So the first part of the question is also related to the left brain and right brain. And it also answers the question when people approach us and say, if you're psychic, how come you can't win the lottery? Well, it's because like Joe, I don't know if you heard the name Joe McMonagle. He is one of the best remote viewers. He was like, I think he was number 001 in Project Stargate, and he's incredible. Like your jaw will drop when you see what he, like nobody is at his level. And he will say that in order to be a world-class remote viewer, you have to give up what it is to be human. And it like makes you go, huh? What do you mean by that? Well, what it means is when I just talked about the left brain, it wants everything to make sense. So your left brain, and we need it. We need it to survive because it finds patterns, it gives us warnings, it kind of it does its job. But we can't be using that in remote viewing. And so an example that we always use is we'll say, for example, say I perceive something that's red, shiny, and round. Most people, their left brain will kick in and go, red, shiny, oh, an apple. And so that's because we put together the pattern of what we know of is red, shiny, and brown. It's most likely an apple. But what if you're on a case where you're looking for a missing person and it's not, you're describing a fruit basket instead of a red truck that's near the person.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't want to get caught up into, like you said, like if they drew a teddy bear, you don't want to get caught up in that because it could be a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
It could be some kind of symbol of something else. So we don't want to hang on to that because then the whole rest of the session, we're going to be describing, a teddy bear in a carnival and I won it at a carnival. And you just start making up a whole story. And so that's the challenge that we have is trying to balance that left brain so it doesn't hijack our session
Mm-hmm.
and that the right brain can kind of go on and do its thing.
So, for people who are skeptical of this, right? For people who are skeptical of this, do you have any examples of remote viewing that led to something directly?
Just recently, we were working, so I teach remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you even know, I have a class that I teach,
Yeah, I
and it's
remember you mentioning it to me a few months ago.
a 6-week course. And what I'm doing is because I get emails all the time for people that need help looking for missing things and people and different kind of cool stuff. And one of the people reached out to me. She's an author of true crime, and she wanted my remote viewers to do a session on the Murdaugh case because she was writing a book on the Murdaugh case. Are you familiar with that?
Just tell everyone what it is real quick.
Okay, so the Murdaugh case was in South Carolina. It's that the guy who was an attorney that killed his wife and son. And then there's also a whole bunch of other crimes associated with the family. So she was writing this book on some of these other things going on. And something I didn't mention that's really, really important to this kind of remote viewing is that people that are doing the session, they are blind to the target. That means they have no clue what they're looking at. So my students that I had do this true crime, all they do is I said, you're going to be doing a true crime. So true crime.
I guess that would put in some unconscious bias if you were to tell them what they were looking for, right?
Right.
This is kind of like a placebo experiment.
Exactly. Like, for example, Tom DeLonge from A Stairway to the
Blink 182.
Yeah.
The Stars production, Looking for Aliens, that whole thing.
Yeah. Academy, yeah. So he hired us to remote view. We were blind not only to the target, but nobody told us he was our person. So that, because if they would have said Tom DeLonge's hiring you, we would for sure get aliens. But because I still got aliens and didn't even know it was Tom DeLonge, it makes it more credible. You know, so
it's a double blind study is what it is.
Exactly. And then if you go to my website, you can see some of the research that's been peer reviewed and published. But back to an example. So the Murdaugh case. So I had my students do this, and one of them actually in her session perceived like she had a vision of a headline in the news that said something about cracking, and she put quotes, like she wrote the word cracking and then quotes, and she said headline. And she lives in New Zealand. Okay, so she's not even in America. So the author, when she got the session, found a headline from the East Coast in some newspaper. I can't remember. We have it written down. I just don't remember off the top of my head. And the headline said, in quotes, case cracked, like use exact words in the headline. So it's as if she saw that headline, because it was, maybe she was a little off with cracking, but cracked, so that was really cool. And then some of the other people knew the exact position of one of the bodies that they found. She sketched out the exact position.
Now, do they do anything in remote viewing? Like I know they do this in different forms of paranormal searching. A lot of Priscilla, my astrologer, she does death charts and she helps locate people. And she's very good at it. You know what? I'm gonna actually have her on to talk about that because I don't know if she can for an hour yet, but she's been doing it. Do they give you like articles of clothing or things of that nature that help generate the energetic field of what you're looking for?
Yeah, isn't that, I think that's not telekinesis, but like when they touch it, they can tune into something.
Correct.
Yeah. We don't do that, but you can do that. I mean, you can apply it to it, but it's not part of. But we do have other skills that we develop, like using a pendulum. We use timelines. We use a bunch of mapping. So I was on a case looking for a missing person, and I triangulated an area. So what I did was I took a piece of paper and I put an X in the middle, and I said, "This is the missing person." And then what I did was I tuned in to the area and I was able to perceive like 3 locations near it. So what ended up happening is the detectives were able, because they knew the area, I didn't, they were able to take all the things I mentioned and then take it, because they were familiar, took it to the map and they said, okay, she mentioned a forest, she mentioned a dilapidated structure, and she mentioned a body of water. So they went and tried to find And that's how it helped them go find this guy. So that was really cool.
Cool. Can you differentiate between astral projection and remote viewing?
So so remote viewing is projecting your subconscious to a location or to the target. Okay, so you're projecting your subconscious to the target. Bilocation is very similar, but we kind of keep a control on what we're doing. So we aren't, we're not just letting it all go. But there are forms of remote viewing called ERV where you could bilocate. And the guy, John Vivacco, who taught me how to remote view, he actually bilocated to a burning building that happened in the past, and his whole face for like 30 seconds became inflamed, not inflamed, but all red, and like a rash broke out in his face as if he was burned, and then it eventually went away. It was I wasn't there, but he tells a story about it, and it's just like, whoa. And there's a lot of witnesses that saw the whole thing. But you're definitely, there are people that, like, if I give them a target, so this one lady, she's allergic to strawberries. I had no idea. And I gave her a target of a fruit basket, and it had strawberries. And she started, like, when she was doing her session, she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so itchy and I don't like this and I'm nauseous." And she was getting some kind of physical reaction to the strawberries. And the same, like if you have a fear of bridges, if you have a target that's bridges, you might feel destabilized, or like, I need to get out of here, I can't breathe. So you definitely have a you definitely have an aesthetic impact, like, you're
Right.
there.
What you guys who are listening have to understand is the reason this is so important is because it shows you that our physical being and our physical locality and our separation is an illusion. You can go off into the ether and find things. It's still fine tuning it because, I mean, Michelle, if we had this conversation 100 years ago, the church would have burnt us alive.
Oh
But
my God.
yeah. But like now, it's been declassified, and there's some projects. Um, so how does one begin to train themselves to do this?
So I mean, there's tons of books on it. There are people that can learn from a book. It But I'll start to say this is natural. This is,
Right.
that's the one thing, like, you bring up religion in the church. It's like, it's kind of like, I just think it's funny because, they're like, they have such a huge fear of these things, but they're natural human. I'm also a hypnotherapist, and all these things are us natural. This is what we naturally do. And it's
Right.
been suppressed for such a long time that it's almost humorous that we have to learn to do it, because it's like, this is us. This is like hypnosis. We're doing it 50 million times a day. We're in hypnosis.
Right.
Anytime you have focused attention, anybody listening to this show, me talking to you, you listening to me, we're all being hypnotized. Watching TV, driving a car, that's hypnosis. Like, we're not doing anything, that's who we are. And
Right.
the same with our intuition. Like, everybody, gets a feeling, and there's been experiments where I have to look up his name. I keep forgetting. Dr. Benston, I think his name is. I don't know, but he did and this is a big thing, Micah, that a lot there, because this area, like, I'm really into the science of it, and because it's really hard to measure these things, because in regular standard scientific method, you can't apply this kind of, quantum physics and stuff. You can't. It's really hard to
Right.
measure those things. But this cool research project, kind of a bridge, and it says a lot. What he did was, he took these college students, put them in front of a computer, loaded up about 300 images, and some of the images were provocative. So he had, like, women in a bra, or people kissing, or, just whatever. And what he had them, you know, kind of, he was monitoring their brain waves, their blood pressure, like all the, you know, all the things. And so they would sit, and all they had to do was advance each picture. That's all they had to do. So what they learned was, before the provocative picture, every time their bodies, their senses would spike. They would get a spike in their blood pressure or their brain waves or whatever it was.
So they had like an EEG all tapped into their mind. They had blood. They were monitored 100%.
They were totally, and it would
Okay.
spike before the provocative picture. Do you know
Right.
what that says? It says that we are precogging.
Yeah.
Even a split second, we know something before it's going to happen.
Right. So
And that's evidence.
the idea behind the precog, guys, if you want an idea of what a precog is or what a precog is, there's a it's not, I'm not going to use the word bastardized, but there's a very advanced civilization form of it in Philip K. Dick's Minority Report. If you've ever seen Minority Report, guys, the three people in the water's
Yeah.
a conducive. That's why they use the water. They were precogs. They were able to, we're all accessing the same information, guys.
Exactly. And so that's the thing. So yeah, so if you want, you know, everybody has it, everyone can do it. And I train, you know, so I teach you the protocol, and we take it step by step. And the only, you know, you brought up skeptical people. Well, I challenge them to have an experience. I challenge them, before they say anything skeptical, try it.
Well, is
And
it the
see,
kind of thing, because you mentioned hypnotherapy too, and from what I understand about hypnosis, I understand that you have to be open to the idea of it, because if you're completely shut off, it's not going to work on you. Is it the same thing with remote viewing?
I guess so. The thing for hypnosis is, like I said, like, people may be in denial, but they're in hypnosis all day, whether they want to or not, because the actual definition of hypnosis is focused attention. It's when somebody has focused attention, but then somebody else comes in and gives you some kind of suggestion, and then it kind of replays in your head. And then there's hypnotherapy, which you sit down with somebody and you actually work on an issue.
Do
And then what
you do
you're,
regressive past life?
yes,
Okay,
yeah.
because there is a school of thought out there that is trying to pervert that and trying to take that down a peg. I don't know if you've heard of the people who say that people who work out past life trauma, a lot of the hypnotherapists have been accused of implanting false memories.
It unfortunately, you have to trust the people you're working with. That is a possibility. There can be negative in all these things. And I actually, you know, I'm very careful about just having good intentions. And I think intention is one of the most important, powerful things that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think every time I remote view, my intention is, if we're remote viewing aliens or anything, I'm always remote viewing, it, you know, kind and, you know, just that, what is it? Benevolent. That, I couldn't think of the word. I'm always remote viewing benevolent. The only area that um, that's a little fuzzy is when we're doing crimes and true crimes. But I still have a positive intuition because I want to help people. Like, for missing people, my intention is to help the loved ones because they have a right to know where their loved ones are. So I do have a very, but not everybody can do true crime.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important to set boundaries, and then also there's something we do at the end where we kind of sever that connection to that session. It's, you know, you have to be responsible in all these things because they're very powerful.
Now, when you're doing true crimes or things of that nature, do you empathetically? You mentioned how physicality manifests um, the fire with the red of the face, or you're talking about the allergic reaction or things of that. But do you manifest the emotion, the fear from the person as well too?
So the sessions are designed where if you put yourself there, then you will. But you can also be an observer.
Mhm.
So, and that's all part of being trained is, uh, kind of learning when you can trust to, we have a part where you can blend with a subject, but if you feel, and we teach you, if you feel like red flag, then you don't need to blend with them. You can just observe them.
Mhm.
But if you feel safe and you feel you can handle it, and it's all about trusting your intuition. There's just so much to learn about remote viewing. I've gained so much confidence about, like if people have trouble making decisions or anything, you just start focusing on your own body because you have everything right here in your body. You don't need anything. All your answers are here. You just have to listen, and I feel like remote viewing is a really great tool or skill that
Mhm.
will help you get to, and there's a lot of personal stuff. Like people have given me targets about me personally, um like what foods should Michelle stay away from? And of course they didn't tell me that's what I was doing, because then I'd be like, oh, I'm not going to put chocolate cake on there. So, but no, but yeah, I was getting in my session, so I didn't know what it was about, but I was drawing this picture and describing something that I think is mushrooms. And so I think I'm supposed to stay away from mushrooms. I had GMO in there, I had DNA, like all this weird stuff in that session that made sense to um, foods that I should stay away from.
So I guess my question is do we remote view? What do we do when we sleep? Do we remote view? Do we astral project? Do we do both?
So when we sleep, I feel so again, I'm going to bring up the word intention. So I feel like whatever your intention is what you do. So I studied, have you ever heard of Robert Bruce?
I have, but it sounds familiar, but I don't remember what the work is.
So Robert Bruce, he's from Australia, and he at one time back in the Art Bell days, he was really big in astral projection or OBEs, outer body experience. So he had like a workbook and all this stuff. And since I worked with Art Bell, I kind of got, to talk to these people on my own and ask personal questions. And so I was like obsessed with OBEs, and I wanted to do it. And I wasn't one of those people that it just happens to. So I had to work at it. And so for a whole year, I worked on doing that based on his book. And so one of the big things that I learned is it's about an intention. So what I kind of developed was getting an excitement about a place I wanted to visit. So, for example, I really want to go to the pyramids. So before I would go to sleep, I'd say, I'm going to project to the pyramids. I'm going to remember in the morning. Like I put everything in
That's
there.
manifestation, is what it is.
Yeah. And I was able to do it with this process. I was successful 3 times. I went to Mars, I went to the pyramids, and then I saw my dad who passed away. And what was interesting with the pyramids is that um, I perceived that there was something about 12 to, I don't know, deep under the pyramids that looked like some kind of like a water. I don't know if it was water, but it was these tubes that were under, and they were made of gold. And I think they transported water. I'm pretty sure. I don't know what it transported, but it was like a system under the pyramid. And so I went and spoke to some of, I don't know if you know, I think his name is Richard Scooch, and he's one of the biggest research. I think he's on the show Ancient Aliens, and he researches the pyramids. And I called him up and I said, "Do you know anything about what's under the pyramids?" Because I had
Well, they
an
won't let us excavate. I mean, there's
that's
been
what he
countless
said.
people that say the Hall of Atlantis, the records are under the Sphinx's paw. There's been people that have projected and say behind the Sphinx's ear, there's a doorway. There's been people, they won't let you excavate.
Right,
And
right.
if you if
That's
you
what he
study
said to me.
Hermeticism, if you've ever read Thoth or Toth, Hermes Trismegistus, as he was called, because he was around so long they gave him two separate names from two different civilizations. his spaceship is under the Sphinx. And
Wow.
supposedly it's interdimensional, and they say in our dimension it's only 3 atoms thick. That's how you would notice it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of stuff going on under there. That we
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's basically, you said, I have a lot of theories about what you're saying is true, but like you said, they won't let us in to excavate, or, they just put the book on it. But it does make me wonder, because like, I don't know, like I wasn't planning to have that experience. It just kind of popped
Right.
in.
Some people say there's an underground city that goes like 50, 100 feet deep
It wouldn't surprise
with
me.
different
And
rooms and tunnels.
I also feel like, on Mars too. I think that there was this, because we have done a lot of projects where we have people look at Mars in remote viewing, and we got a lot of data that suggests that there was a civil
100%.
civilization like millions of years ago.
Michelle, I don't know if you know this, but in the atmosphere of Mars, there is a radioactive isotope that is in the ether of Mars. It's part of the air breakup, and this particular isotope could have only gotten there through an explosion of a nuclear weapon.
Whoa, that's
And they
interesting.
don't want you to know this, but it's
Yeah,
a fact. Mars, first of all, the planets were not always aligned in the way that they are. Some were closer, some
true.
were further. They shift. Um, and Mars was habitable. It was habited. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the scientists say that, and it's plausible because if you think about, I watch this show. I'm like so nerdy. I watch this show. What's it called? Like, Life Without People, and it shows. It's a documentary, and it shows like what life would be like in, it'll say 10 years, 100 years, a
Right.
million
It all
years.
reverts back to nature.
And the entropy, like, so it's plausible that you can see nothing left of a civilization, or that it's deep under the sand of Mars, just like you're saying, under the Sphinx. There could be a whole nother city under
Well,
the
Michelle, why
ground.
wouldn't there be? I mean, we only
Right,
know about the Sphinx because Napoleon came through Egypt and found its
right.
head. We have daguerreotypes from the 1870s. A daguerreotype, guys, it's an early light exposure way of showing film back from the 1870s, whereas now it's digital. But it's a different light exposure. Think about the giant camera and that kind of thing. The fact that we found the Sphinx is mind-blowing to itself. And I have a theory that everything was done in duality, so there's another Sphinx that's facing it. But we found that Sphinx. That was covered under sand. That's 12,000 years or 10,000 years that it was covered under.
Yeah,
You don't think things are under the Mars?
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And when you watch this show, like Life After People, because I was always skeptical, like, oh, come on, you have metals and you have this, and it shows how things break down. And because I'm like, oh, they can break down, and there's evidence where, there's areas on the earth where people don't live there anymore, and they use that to study what
Right.
happens, how the breakdown
You
happens.
know what the interesting thing too is when they look for planets, guys. And first of all, if a planet is 60% as habitable on viewing or as they figure it out, then it's called a Kepler. It's given the name Kepler when it's 60% as habitable as Earth. But the problem what people do is when these scientists look, first of all, you can look at the sun, right? I can see the sun coming in on me right now. You can look for planets out there. But when you look for planets, you have to understand these planets don't emit light. So the only way you can even know they exist is you have to find shadows that come over them. And then you measure them. And then there's other things that go into, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically what you guys need to understand is that you have your Keplars, but what they're doing is they're looking for forms of life. They're looking for areas where life could be possible. And the problem with that is they're looking at it based on our air composition, the fact that we're all carbon, the fact that the air is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and then 1% a couple other ones. They're looking for this kind of thing. They're looking for water because water, if you find water, you could find life forms. But the problem is that with a completely different air composition, life doesn't always come the way that we are.
Right.
Right?
That's
This
what
is
we're
why when
familiar
you go to other planets, you have to wear spacesuits because
with.
the atmosphere is different. Okay, there's things called anaerobic life forms on this planet, where life forms where they when they hit oxygen, they die.
Mhm.
Whereas we need oxygen to live. They're not thinking outside the box as far as how to look for life. They're looking for life as we know it, as we are here, and they're not going to find it.
Yeah, in fact, the first life forms on Earth didn't breathe oxygen. I mean that they didn't, and then when the Earth developed and changed over to oxygen, they all died. That was one of the first what do they call it? The
Mass
you know
exit, whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
I know what you
yeah.
mean.
So yeah, it's totally plausible. I mean, the scientists now are looking at things based on what they're familiar with. And, and also I think a lot about, um, we know about, you know, our, um, our basic physics here that we're used to, like the forces and
Right.
whatever. But in other places, they may not follow the same laws that we follow. I mean,
Exactly.
you know, so I mean, hey, don't you watch Star Trek? I mean, Star Trek tells it all,
It's
right?
true.
I mean, come
Um,
on.
and the funny thing is they're trying to unify all the forces together, and gravity just doesn't fit into it.
There's going to be a whole different uh I think over time. I also think like I tell my kids all the time like okay, so when everybody was into Newtonian stuff, everyone thought that's a real deal. Like nobody had a doubt. Then
Mm-hmm.
Einstein comes along and he starts making changes to things like no one would have ever thought. And
Mm-hmm.
he went through hell to try to prove his stuff. And now they're even, now we believe in Einstein and there's no doubt in our mind, but now there's people coming out and questioning some of the things he says.
Yeah.
So it's just going to keep going. It's just, we are at the tip of the iceberg. We're babies. We are little babies right
Mm-hmm.
now.
So how is uh, how is remote viewing mostly used as far as when they come to you? What like if you had to break down the majority of what they ask you to do with it?
Oh gosh. Well, I guess it's a little of everything. We also worked on a treasure in Utah. They had a treasure hunt for $25,000. We did that. But I would say something I didn't even talk about is a version of remote viewing where people make money. And that's really where they come to us the most. So companies, big companies that use remote viewing for us to look at stocks, to look at the stock market. A lot of people like to wager on sporting events and things like that. So we do things we do that. Those are probably the most popular. In fact, a lot of my science papers are based on those methods because I feel like money talks. And
Mm-hmm.
when you tell people, look, I'm answering your question, we are making money using psychic abilities. Here's the proof. We have
Yeah,
a
that's how
60% hit
unfortunately
rate.
that's the language you have to speak to people in these days.
Yeah, and like we only used like we didn't bet a ton of money. We did $1 just to make a point. But there are people like I know several people that have made big money. And then also a whole nother group working on cryptocurrency, which is pretty cool, that they're doing that too.
Wow, cool. So how did you even get into all of this?
So I was I think it's because I went to hypnosis school. And it opened up, I was just like a normal person. I guess I'm not normal anymore, but I'm proud to be not normal. I was just normal going through my life, and there were things in my life that I needed to change, and one was like getting rid of my husband. So And so it just kind of opened up this door, like, oh, what am I going to do? And I found that I was more spiritual and less religious. Like I think that I didn't like that trappings of religion, and
Right.
I was really in there. That's a whole nother story. But so I think that was my way out, and really finding uh, my true belief, because that was important to me. When I was very young, I asked my dad, my poor dad, I asked him, I said, who wrote the Bible? And he's like, well, Michelle, cute little darling little 8-year-old Michelle, who do you think wrote the Bible? And I said, the aliens.
Yeah.
I mean, I was 8 years old, like I don't even know whatever, but I still believe it. I still, to this day, I'm not sure if I believe that they were superior people, more advanced than us. And because we just didn't have when you have someone come here and start doing things that's going to look like magic or something that you don't know you could do, you would think of them as a god. And if they hand you a book, you're like, oh, I got to follow this. So I don't, so I kind of stared away from that for a long time just to be grounded in life and get married, have kids. And I just lost myself and turned into a kind of drone. And then I think it felt like I woke up one day and I'm just like, wait, there's more than this. Like, I just can't, we have more potential. And remote viewing spoke to me. It's like it mixes the science, it has evidence. When you do it yourself, like I had a class where even the men in the class started to cry. Not full blown cry. I don't want to
Right.
demasculate them or anything. But they were like, this works. They were in shock, because they came in skeptical and challenging. And when they saw their paper and they saw, she didn't tell me anything. She just said, remote view a picture. And they had all the elements of the picture. How could I do that? Well, yeah, you did that. So you have to have an experience. And I think, really that's how it
Is
happens.
there an incredibly well-known example of remote viewing that you can share with us?
Something I personally did, or
One that
just
you know.
something
It doesn't
you
have to be. It doesn't have to be you, but maybe something that was kind of dramatized on TV or things of that. Just something that's really well known.
did. Let's see, what was well known? Um, there's been let me think. A couple. So I was on an episode of Ancient Aliens. I don't even know if you knew that.
No,
Um,
I didn't. That's amazing.
yeah, and we were at East Ranch, and we were remote viewing. We were in the dungeon, and they just set up cameras and watched us work. And then they didn't tell us, but we were remote viewing what the producers were doing up on the ground, and they were sky watching. And and it was really interesting and unexpected. So you would think that you're at East Ranch, you're gonna see UFOs, but the truth is we were seeing satellites. They weren't UFOs; they were
Mm.
satellites. So that was pretty interesting because it was not what people expected. Then we've done remote viewing on let's see, Bigfoot. People have done Bigfoot, the Patterson Gimlin footage, and then also the what they call the Skinny Bob footage. We have there's a lot of YouTube videos with our work, showing samples of our session. Um, let's see what else. And then there's the military, like they have endless amounts of stuff. You can look it up. Joe McMoneagle research he actually did a remote viewing on Mars, and he has a whole lecture and pictures and everything that show. So he did it way before we had photos of Mars. He did his session. So when the photos came in from Mars, and he lined up his session with those photos, you were able to match up what he said. And he was talking about these subjects that were like giants. He had pyramids there that he drew in his session, and the location of these pyramids, which were near a crater, and there is a picture exactly of that. So that was cool. Then the military, they found a Russian submarine that nobody knew about. It was a nuclear sub, and he drew it. And then, another one is Ingo Swann, who's the forefather of remote viewing. He did a session way before we had any evidence that, you know how Saturn has rings around it? He said Jupiter has rings around it. Well, we just recently learned that Jupiter has rings around it. So he was able to, well, he passed away now. So I'm not sure if he ever knew that he was right on that. So yeah, there's tons. Like I could probably go on all day.
That's amazing. I love it.
And
So
especially when you're helping to find missing people and then they find them. I mean, that can't get better than that.
yeah, absolutely.
And wait, one more. Last night, we remote viewed this lady. She lost her phone and she asked us to remote view it. And she found it in the morning.
Yeah,
Exactly where we told her. Yeah.
it's amazing. Wow, very cool. So, how old is the science of remote viewing?
I think it's like forever.
I get it. No, okay, the modern remote viewing, I should say.
I think it was so back in the 70s when they formed Stanford Research Institute took Ingo Swann, Russell Targ, and Hal Puthoff, and they are the ones that kind of set the protocol of it. So I would say like the formal remote viewing that we know started in the 70s, and then was declassified in the 90s.
Why do you think it was declassified?
I think they stopped the project because there was a lot of, like I just started to talk about the fear. Um, you know, I think there were a lot of people in, that were funding it through the government that had a fear like this, the religion and, those kinds of things that it scares people. And it's very powerful because it was working. Um, but even though they declassified that, I still have a feeling, I don't have evidence, but I have a very strong feeling that they're doing stuff. They're still doing stuff. Definitely. I think if I were to make a guess, I feel like they're adding technology to amplify our psychic abilities.
I agree.
I have no evidence of that. It's just my intuition and it'll be declassified at some point. But I feel like now we're starting to use technologies to boost up because this whole idea of interdimensional beings, that whole idea of that is starting to come forward. In fact, I'm a producer of a documentary that's going to be coming out in October called Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot. And we go into this whole science of it with experts in the field, like legitimate experts in the field. And so, like, hopefully everyone will go watch that. And and I think that's the way it's going. I think going into that kind of the physics, quantum physics, and things like that.
So, how long is like an average remote viewing session? I guess the times are different, but if you had to say how long like an average session would be.
So if I'm doing a big case, my first session would be it averages an hour. And then the ones when we're doing the other kind with money, helping, those are like 10-minute sessions. It's like a different technique. Those are only 10 minutes because it's a binary target. And so you're just kind of going, is it this or this? Is it up or down, over, under? It's like that. But the other ones, we want as much details as we can possibly get. So that could take an hour. Some people take longer. When I first started, my sessions were like 6 hours. But the thing is, you can take breaks. So,
Is that
you
just
know,
because you were new to it, or is that because?
I also think I was very, I'm a perfectionist and I have a lot of, remember in the beginning I talked about left brain, right brain.
Yeah.
I am very, like, I couldn't surrender my left brain. Everything in my session had to have a nice, cute little bow. It had to make sense. It had to be neat and beautiful and orderly. Now I find like my best sessions are when I'm like, I have no idea what this is. And it's always a hit,
It
when
always
I
comes
feel
in,
like
right?
that.
I talk about this too, Michelle. I don't know if you know this, but my first book in my series, it took me 2 years to write, to edit, to go back and write again, to edit. My seventh book I wrote in 19 days.
Yeah, I remember that. I was like, "Whoa." Yeah, I think, yeah, especially when you're fighting that compulsion to everything has to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those, what we perceive as mistakes are actually the best things that ever happened to us, and
Absolutely.
we have to
So,
lean into it.
have you ever taught a session, like a 6 week session? So let's say week 5, right? Where you have everybody with a piece of paper and they're all looking for, you give them like keywords or they're looking for something, right? Do you ever find that like a bunch of them end up drawing the same thing?
All the, all the time, all the time. And the thing is, they will all have this. And here's the thing, when they do their sessions, so say I have about 10 people in the class, they're doing their sessions at home. They don't even, like, like, nobody knows each other's emails.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody in the class, they can see each other on Zoom. Like, if we're having a Zoom class, they'll see each other's face. They know nothing about each other, and they're all over the world. I have someone in New Zealand, England, California, East Coast, West Coast, Canada, all over the place. So they can't do that. And then also when you look at the sessions, you know that they weren't cheating. So, and when things line up, it just reinforces like the data. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this must be true. If we all got this, what are the odds? We
Mm-hmm.
had no clue like, we had no clue what the target was, and we all have the same information.
Okay, so I'm in one of your classes right now. You're about to give me an assignment. Okay, tell me how you would word it. How? Tell me what you would say to me, and then I would start doing it.
Oh, here's your target. Do your session.
That's it.
Yeah, your target is 4709-3214. Do your session. And behind the scenes, I have a whole project set up. So behind the scenes, I write out tasking. So if it's a missing person, it'll say, sketch and describe the current location of so and so. Okay, and I have it in an envelope. And you don't see that until you send me your session. Then and then even I may even retask you before you see it. I may say, "Oh, you have something very interesting on page 3. Can you go back and look at that?" I won't even lead you. I'll just say, "Oh, you mentioned a door. Go look at that. Go look at that door and walk through the door and tell me what's there." And then you'll send that back, and then when I'm finished, then I'll say, "Hey, by the way, you were looking for the current location of so and so." Oh, and then you look at your session, you look at the tasking, and you put it all together.
Have you ever
So
had any?
give me a number.
Have you ever had any students for yourself that have really just excelled and you've kind of mentored and kind of
Oh,
took off?
ton, ton. Yeah, because it's just about practice, and everybody has the talent. It's just how much you want to really be good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So
And you can
before
have
you
good days and bad days.
before you remote view, is there anything that you'll do? Will you like look at a candle or walk around outside? Do you have any prep for it?
I do a cool down. So I'll listen to binaural beats,
Yes. Yes.
and I want to just clear my mind. Like, I just want my mind to um be at nothing. We even have built in, because we get these advanced perceptions, like when someone says, Micah, I want you to do a project for me. You're all of a sudden going to get an image. Oh, it's going to be this. So we even have built into the session to get rid of that, because we don't want you to keep going with that. We have a page design, like if you get an advanced depression, get it out of your system, because we want you to start at zero. We want you just the black pearl. We want you at nothing, and then just start from there. And we don't want you to name anything. Don't name, just describe, which is an unusual thing, because through life, we have shortcuts. We'll say, hand me the pen. We don't say, hand me the pink tubular, smooth and bumpy, thing. We don't say that. We say, hand me the pen. But in remote viewing, you start learning that, no, we describe things, because if I say pink and tubular, it may not be a pen. It may be something totally different. Wow. So we just go to low level descriptions, and that's really the key.
Wow.
And then as you progress through the session, towards the end, you have something called the matrix. And that's like, it is kind of like being in the matrix, because at this point, you're kind of primed from the beginning. And by the time you get to the matrix, you're having awesome experiences, because you're like there, it's there. It feels real at that point. So
wow.
it's
So
the sweet spot.
excuse me. So with the last minute or so that we have, can you just let everyone know, if they're interested, where they can find you and your work, and where they might have seen you before?
So if anyone wants to take my class, I'm going to be having a class in August. So my website is butterflyeffectcenter.com. And it's so it's BUTTER effect, EFFECT, fly effect center, CENTER.com. And you can see all my papers, and there's a contact form. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them. And I would love, like, I want the world to be remote viewing, because I just think it's so helpful. You can answer any question. Like, everybody needs to remote view. So there.
Michelle, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to have this uploaded. I'll send you a link and you can share it out, okay?
Yes, sir. I would love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you
And you're
very
so
much.
smart, like a day. You're so smart.
I try.
All right. Take care.